I want to take a couple minutes today to talk about our benchmark series. So, if you are a customer with us, whether on the wholesale or the retail side, or on our team, you are familiar with benchmark and you've probably had quite a bit of it. But what is it exactly? Is it a name? Is it a blend? Is it a special coffee? And I want to kind of just navigate this a little bit and kind of unpack what we mean when we say benchmark. Um, so, when we started the roasting wing of Hardy Coffee Company, the idea was to kind of try to capture some of this kind of like Midwest sensibility, kind of, hard work, slightly no frills way of being. And I thought it would be fun to create a coffee that kind of mirrored that concept. And that was kind of the birth of the benchmark idea. I wanted something that's going to be really quality, but also something that would be very practical. This was a common thing that we had seen just through working with other wholesale accounts is, inevitably Friday would roll around. You're about to shut everything down for the week. And you'd get a series of hurried phone calls being like, hey, I am good on everything, but I do need 2 pounds of cold brew. Or I'm good on everything, but I need 10 pounds of espresso to get me through the weekend. And there was a real need for something to simplify inventory control for our wholesale partners. And we roast for ourselves also. So we are, also our customer. And we wanted to create something that was hardworking, straightforward, simple, but really high quality that could cover a lot of territory. And thus, Benchmark was born. We use it as espresso, we use it as a cold brew, and we also use it as our batch brew. And it works well in all those functions. And the idea of Benchmark is what allows us to get that functionality out of it. So I know that sounds a little strange, but it really is a target more than anything. So you'll see things on the grocery store shelves like breakfast blend or, espresso blend. And blending is a usable tool, but as much as anything, sometimes it's just a way of kind of creating a concept with a name that then gives the roaster or whomever is doing the blending the agency to create that with any number of pieces available. Because the truth of the matter is, coffee is a seed that grows inside of a cherry and it's a crop. So there's a lot of variability in coffee crops from year to year. And not all origins and coffees are available throughout the year. So the nuts and bolts of creating something that's consistent throughout the year requires the ability to tweak its kind of base components. And this is common. I mean, most coffees are a blend of a certain degree. A lot of times it's even just at origin. It might be like a Columbia Regional Select. It's a certain region, and it's a curated blend of, maybe 200 different lots of coffee. Or a lot of people, when they're making their espresso blends, they're looking for, maybe a certain specific flavor profile that you could only achieve by blending different coffees. So that is kind of Benchmark for us. It is a target, it's a concept, and it is a flavor profile more than anything. It's a flavor profile that has to function in a certain way. And the job is for us in the roasting department to source and figure out how to roast the appropriate coffees to hit that target. And it sounds weird, but it actually keeps it more consistent because green coffee also ages. So it doesn't taste the same from just coming into the States, like a fresh crop coffee. Tastes pretty different than a coffee that's past crop. The coffee is losing moisture. It's reacting with the environment. And as a result, you could have a pretty drastic swing in flavor from month 1 to month 12. So the reality of the situation is sometimes you need to change the blend to create something that's more stable and consistent. The ironic thing is, Benchmark for us is usually a single origin espresso. And when we say single origin, we mean it's a coffee from a single farm, usually, is what that means. Sometimes you could get single origin coffees that are a blend from a region. But when we talk about it, we mean like it's a single farm. And we work with a couple partner farms, where we're consistently buying a good chunk of coffee from a handful of farms throughout the year to cover our time that we need. And these coffees exhibit the properties that we need in order to roast them to create Benchmark. So, and this kind of gives us some added benefits. Without actually heavily blending coffees from different origins, we can have a very like concise roast profile for it. And it's going to, there's less variables to go wrong. So it creates a certain stability into it. And we don't have to kind of reach into the bag of roasting tricks to kind of coax certain flavors out of our coffee. We could just have a really kind of standard neutral roast that allows it to be really like shelf stable and user friendly. And it also gives us an insight into who's growing it. So kind of flashing on the screen is some pictures of Dina Monte Rosso. So the Finca Pensamiento is a coffee that we leverage heavily for our benchmark blends. And that's just kind of exciting to be able to have that extra insight and that ability to kind of put a face of the producer to the product that we get to enjoy, because really they have the hardest part of the job. And if it wasn't for them and their quality of care in the production piece of it, we wouldn't even have a great product to roast in the first place. So a little bit of the nuts and bolts about our benchmark. What we're looking for is something that, as an espresso, it's syrupy and a little bit bright. You know, when we dial it in, we like it to be kind of a little bit zippy just by itself, so that way it could kind of cut through the milk well. It's citrusy. It's got like a syrupy dark chocolate thing going to it. It's really interesting, and it plays well in a milk-based drink. But we also want it to, when we batch brew it, kind of to have a different side to it, where it's a little more traditional. It's that kind of like slightly smoky, kind of full city roast that people expect when they think of coffee, like the generic coffee flavor. We wanted a really, really good quality version of that coffee flavor. So our standard benchmark is what we would call a full city roast. If you really want to get in the weeds on the roasting side of it, we're kind of taking it right up to the point. There's 3 primary phases of roasts. As you kind of get into what we call the development phase, is you have the enzymatic phase. And this is when all of your acids are coming out. Acids are sour, and they have a lot of really interesting tastes like citrus, your kind of fruit, herbal, floral domain of flavors are attached to acidity. Light roasts have a lot of that in spades. You keep roasting, you get to the next piece of it, which is called the sugars browning phase. And you still have acids present, but they start to taper off a little bit, and you start to caramelize sugars. You get sweet caramel-like, honey-like notes. You get milk chocolate, and if you keep going, you start to get into darker chocolate notes. And then you reach a third phase called dry distillation. At this point, you get those really kind of traditional coffee flavors. You get a certain amount of oiliness, often with the roasts, or a kind of smoky, spicy flavor to it. Not spicy as in heat, but like spices like complex, like anise or something like that. And what we're kind of doing is we're targeting that line between sugars browning and dry distillation. We're trying to capture a little bit of both. So that way, when we run it through an espresso machine, it's got some acid on tap still. It's diminished, but the espresso machine can still pull that out, and it's going to merge well with that kind of like sweet side from the sugars browning phase. But when you have a more neutral brew, like a batch brew, it's going to pull out more of that kind of dry distillation side. So you're going to get that really kind of classic, familiar coffee taste. And then it's going to cold brew well also. You're not competing with a ton of acid that is going to oxidize, but it's not so smoky that's going to clash with stuff either. So it gives us a really nice, usable coffee that is pretty traceable. And it is just, it's easy to use. It sounds weird if you're not used to dialing an espresso or dealing with a bunch of different coffees, but you could kind of get chasing your tail depending on how the roaster has blended and chosen to roast the constituent parts. And this allows us to kind of sidestep that a little bit and have just like a really usable coffee the way it's most likely to be enjoyed. But we also have a darker version. So we have Benchmark Dark, which is same concept. It's the same roast profile. It's the same beans. It is exactly the same, only we take it about 10 degrees further. Just the flavor profile thoroughly into that dry distillation phase. We're still not getting like a ton of oil like your, really heavy French roasts, but it's going to bring out more of a smoky profile and less of like a kind of citrus sweet profile. So if you like a heftier, fuller bodied coffee, Benchmark Dark is a great option, but it's going to function in a similar way. It's going to be good in all of your applications. It's just going to be a little bit more robust. And then we have a decaf version also. So this is a specially selected coffee that is decaffeinated. And we're kind of looking for the decaf alternative that's going to function in similar ways. So there's some slight flavor differences and body differences just that you get with the decaffeination process, but you're going to get a similar function and result from it. Internally and with our wholesale partners, we have cards, and we will kind of list out at any given time the producer, where it's from, kind of the specifics of that. And it's also on the label too. So we always have the origin listed, and if it's from Guatemala or Colombia or wherever it might be from at the given time, we try to notate that for you. But so that is Benchmark. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but I just kind of want to give you a little bit of insight onto what exactly it is and what we mean by it, because that's going to kind of enable you to also plug it in and use it in the way that it's probably going to be its best, but also just interacting with retail customers is being able to kind of plug them into the right coffee. We've tried to, with our lineup, have a good coffee for all kinds of coffee drinkers. And Benchmark is a really vital part of that, to kind of have a good amount of that kind of traditional flavor represented, but in a really respectable and high quality way. So I hope you guys like it. If you have any questions, let me know.